Hi, this is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. Let's talk about metabolic health. And let me start off with an observation by Maslow. And Maslow said that when you have only one tool, and that tool is a hammer, you tend to look at all your problems as nails. And most doctors today think they only have one tool when it comes to metabolic health, and that's statin drugs. And as a result, they have a tendency to look at all problems as a problem of LDL cholesterol. And frankly, I don't think that's the big problem. The big problem is bad metabolic health. Dr. Haller, back in 77, coined the term metabolic syndrome, which described 5 things that all showed insulin resistance and became kind of synonymous with what I refer to as metabolic health. And these 5 factors are really crucial to understanding why the low-carb diet works and why they seem to cure so many different things. I mean, one of the things that really, it almost sounds like, that a lot of people, when they start talking about low-carb diets, they're almost selling snake oil, because here's something that can take care of heart disease, dementia, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune diseases, Crohn's diseases. There's a whole host of different things that this thing all seems to take care of. And it's not the diet, it's fixing your metabolic health. Once you're metabolically healthy, it takes care of a lot of other things. When you really look at the whole host of these chronic diseases that the majority of Americans are suffering under, it really boils down to really crappy metabolic health. Only about 12% of this country is what they consider metabolically healthy. You do not have one of the markers of the metabolic syndrome. And this was originally was called Syndrome X. It was a French doctor started looking at it going, there seems to be this real strange link between fat people and this poor metabolic health and atherosclerosis and heart disease. And he kind of got the ball rolling in about 1927, and the ideas expanded. Now, the question is, why aren't you hearing about this? Why isn't this the discussion you have with your doctor? And frankly, I can give you a trillion reasons why not. Because there's no drug for it. If there's a drug for it, trust me, your doctor would be talking to you about it. But because we have such a horrible dysfunctional system, unless there's money behind it, nobody cares. Realize that the statin drug industry, the one thing that they can take care of, they can reduce LDL cholesterol. And you know how much that's worth? They've sold $1 trillion worth of statins. That's why that's the only thing doctors talk about. It's bought a lot of publicity. If you are a doctor and your patient presents with metabolic syndrome and you don't talk to them about it, nobody's going to sue you. You're not going to lose your medical license for not talking about it. But if their LDL cholesterol is elevated and they did not prescribe a statin, you can be sued if they have a heart attack later on. So that's what doctors talk about. They're ignoring the most important thing out there, which is metabolic syndrome, because when you have a healthy immune system, you're no longer insulin resistant. And when you're no longer insulin resistant, you're no longer in danger of type 2 diabetes. And when you're no longer a type 2 diabetic, your risk of heart disease and other things go away, and it starts to overall improve your health, making you stronger, making you better to withstand cancers and everything else. This is really what it boils down to. This is the core of good health, is understanding metabolic syndrome and why it's so darn important for your health and for your well-being and your longevity. So let's talk about it. Let's figure out what it is. Well, the number one sign, and basically metabolic syndrome boils down to 5 markers. Now, they're not permanent, but if you've got 3 out of these 5, then you're considered somebody who's got metabolic syndrome, which means you're very high risk of developing type 2 diabetes. You're probably certainly insulin resistant, and you're inflaming your body, and you're creating a whole host of different problems. So, number 1, big waist. If you got a fat waist, man, I'm sorry. If your waist is over 40 and you're a dude, or 35 as a woman, that's step one. I mean, any of you guys can right now can go get a tape measure around your waist, around your navel, and figure out if you've got that. Blood pressure. If it's above 130 or 140, depending on whose measurement you use, that's number two. The other three require blood work, and this is the part that I really wanted to dig into a little bit today. So, number three marker is a fasting blood glucose level of 100 or above. And the reason for that is, and the reason why I keep emphasizing the word fasting, if you've gone 8 to 10 hours without eating and your blood glucose level is still over 100, you got a problem. You're pre-type 2 diabetic, if not a type 2 diabetic. This is what causes inflammation, because your body, your bloodstream, can only handle so much blood glucose. It can only have so much sugar in there before it starts to create problems. It starts to create problems for your kidneys. Other systems in your body start to freak out if you've got too much blood glucose. So, and blood glucose does not mean you've eaten 3 or 4 candy bars in a row. Any carbohydrate will elevate your blood glucose level. Sorry, that's just the way it is. I mean, think about it. Do you know how many carbohydrates you need each day? How many grams of carbohydrates do you need today in order to be optimally healthy? And the answer is, it's a trick question. The answer is 0. You don't need carbohydrates. It's not essential. You can live perfectly well. Your body will create enough glucose to run the kidneys and the other vital functions that it needs glucose for without you eating them. So anytime you eat a carb, and the carb means vegetables, it means wheat, it means bread, it means any type of carbohydrate. Whenever you eat it, you're elevating your blood glucose level. And if you keep it inflamed high all the time, you're going to elevate your fasting glucose level. And if it's over 100, that's one of the markers of metabolic syndrome. So you've gone 12 hours without eating and you've still got a blood glucose level over 100. Your body has not gotten rid of it. What that means is this: your body has no place to store it except for your bloodstream. And it's trying like crazy to use the liver to break that into other components and to store it in your fat. You don't have enough reserve in your muscle. See, when you have an elevated blood glucose level, the first place your body tries to store it is in your muscle. And if you're metabolically healthy, you've got more than enough muscle stores in order for that glucose to go in there safely without having to involve the liver. But when you're overeating carbohydrates, as most people are, and if you're eating lots of ultra-refined, ultra-processed food, you certainly got way too many carbohydrates, and you're going to have too much glucose in the bloodstream. That's inflammatory. That's what begins the cascade of creating a lot of problems. The second blood marker that you want to be looking at is your triglyceride levels. And these last two are in your cholesterol panel. Your doctor just doesn't talk to them about it because there's not a trillion reasons to do so. There's no drug that's going to change your triglyceride level. That can only be done through diet and lifestyle. So what a triglyceride is remember I told you about the glucose and it's too high and it can't store it in the muscle? Well, now it starts to try to store it in the fat. And the vehicle that is being used to put sugar from the bloodstream into the fat is a triglyceride cholesterol. It's a lipoprotein that contains fat, and that's what it's trying to do. And if that's elevated, that's showing you've got too many carbohydrates in your system, your triglyceride levels are high, and you got a problem. Look, if they're over, it depends on whose marker you use. For me, I'm trying to stay in a healthy range in the 60s, but if yours is over 100, you've certainly got high triglyceride levels. Now, let me throw this caveat into this right now before you completely freak out. You're not going to die of high triglycerides. You're not going to die of high blood glucose. You're not even going to die of LDL cholesterol. You're not going to die of HDL cholesterol. These are all markers, and they're transitory markers. They can change very quickly. And if you the week after you switch to a low-carb diet, your triglyceride levels are going to pretty quickly go down to about normal. It's amazing how fast those change. They change very quickly. So don't worry about having that marker, but just realize it is a benchmark. It is a indicator. It's a light that's going off on your dashboard that's warning you about something. So it's not going to kill you, but it is part of this overall indicator of metabolic health. And frankly, your blood glucose, your triglycerides, and your HDL all work together. They are almost all linked. They are a real great marker into your overall level of insulin resistance, how well your body can handle carbohydrates and get them into the muscle tissue where you can store the glucose safely and get it out of your bloodstream. So how do you lower your triglyceride levels? Just eliminate carbs. Frankly, that's what it boils down to. And it's amazing how quickly, again, they will come down when you switch over to a low-carb diet. I mean, you can test this out for yourself for $12. I mean, you can just go over and get a blood work done, get your cholesterol panel done, and it's a relatively inexpensive blood test. And you can order it yourself online. You don't need insurance to do it. Just go over there, any lab, just order the test online, go over to the lab, they'll do the blood draw, and the next day you'll get the results. And it's amazing how quickly your triglyceride levels will go down. They're highly transitory depending on what your diet is at any given time. The number 3 blood marker that you need to be looking at is your HDL cholesterol. And HDL cholesterol is often referred to as the good cholesterol. Frankly, I think that's kind of a misnomer. All cholesterols are markers and they're neutral. But if you want to remember, is this the HDL the important one, or the LDL or whatever? Remember, H stands for happy. This is the way I remember it. The happy cholesterol is the one that you want to be over 40. When it's below 40, you've got low cholesterol, low HDL cholesterol. That's bad. It's really one of the most important markers for overall metabolic health and for cardiovascular health. And if you don't think that's important, I want to remind you that the number 1 killer in the United States of America today is heart disease. The first symptom that you've got heart disease is you die. That's the stakes when it comes to heart disease. Matter of fact, if you want to get the number 1 cause of long-term disability in this country, then have really low HDL, happy cholesterol. Have low HDL, and your chances of having a stroke go up pretty darn dramatically, which means you get the joy of living in a diaper in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. That is the number 1 cause of long-term disability, is that low LDL, which leads to strokes, because all these things work together to inflame the system, to inflame the arteries, keep the body chronically stressed, and creating these problems. If you don't want them, switch over to a low-carb lifestyle, and it's kind of amazing how quickly you will start losing all these various symptoms of poor metabolic health. And the stakes, my friend, are really darn high. I can't emphasize how important this stuff is and how it affects every darn system of your body. When I began this journey toward good health 10 years ago, I was 300 pound. If I wasn't a type 2 diabetic, I was certainly a pre-type 2 diabetic. And I was told by my doctor I was going blind. Her only advice to me was lose weight. Unfortunately, she did not explain to me about metabolic syndrome. But what happened in the course of that is, and I started really working to lose weight. And then I stumbled into low-carb lifestyle, and I started stumbling into metabolic health and why it was important. And it took me years, literally, to study this, to read enough books, to listen to enough lectures, to see enough YouTube videos, to realize just how important metabolic health really was to my overall health. And when I started to fix that, the the back of your eye, the macula, is very delicate tissue, full of lots of veins and arteries, very susceptible to high blood sugar, having poor metabolic health. That's what's going to damage it. This is what causes macular degeneration. And you got one of two options. You can get needles stuck in the back of your eyes, or you can fix your metabolic health. I mean, once that damage happens and it becomes permanent, you're stuck. But you can reverse some of the damage before it becomes permanent if you fix your metabolic health. That's what happened to me. The back of my eyes are fine. I mean, it amazed my eye doc that, here I was with just, the back of my eyes were completely messed up, and I was facing getting those shots for macular degeneration, and within a year it cured, it cleaned up. The next time I saw her, she was thrilled to death. I had, it was showing signs. I was, at one point taking drugs for glaucoma, and that went away too. Suddenly I have no elevated pressure in the back of my eyes. The back of my eye, the macula's cleaned up. Everything's cleared up. And, she's going, wow, you lost weight. That must have done it. No, it was clearing up the metabolic syndrome that fixed everything. But there's no pill for all this stuff. And as a result, nobody is fixing it. Now, let me give you a caveat. I want you to look up a very important study from 2007 from the journal Nature. And back then, the journal Nature, I think, was probably the number one overall journal for medical information. This is back before it became politically correct and woke of late, and was actually a very serious science journal. And they published a study that showed that when you gave people statin drugs and they had low HDL, the so-called good cholesterol, the happy cholesterol, when you gave those two in combination, you increased risk of cardiovascular death. So do me a favor, print out a copy of that study, and when your doctor, if you've got low HDL, the happy cholesterol, and you've got elevated LDL, and he prescribes you a statin, hand him that study and ask him, why is he trying to kill you? Because frankly, very few doctors are aware of the fact that giving statins to people with low LDLs is actually increases your risk of cardiovascular death. So why do we not care about LDL? Well, frankly, when you look at the risks of cardiovascular disease and the possible causes to it, LDL is at the bottom of the barrel. The problem is they've got a pill that will change that. You can lower LDL cholesterol, and as a result, we've been lowering that number year after year. There are some doctors that would love to be able to modify your genetics to get rid of all LDL, but LDL is important to your body. It's overall health. Your brain needs it. People that have got dementia, when they get off of the statins and they elevate their LDL, the dementia gets better. People with Alzheimer's start to remember things again. People that have elevated, according to the current standard levels, the people with the highest levels of LDL live the longest and the healthiest. LDL is pretty much neutral if you're metabolically healthy. And that's the caveat that I would say. And the reason I can say that with even more certainty this week than I could last week is because they just released a new study where they looked at people that were lean mass hyperresponders, people who were metabolically healthy but had ridiculously high LDL levels. And when they looked in their hearts and they followed them for a year, they could find no heart disease. And these are guys that are in their 50s, the prime candidates for heart attacks. Now, it was a small study. It wasn't perfect. But it was the first one where they had actually followed a group of people whose only problem in life, quote unquote, problem, was an elevated LDL. Yet, they had no heart disease. They had no progression of heart disease. They showed no signs of it. In other words, I don't think LDL is the problem. The problem is metabolic syndrome, because that's what's going to lead to type 2 diabetes. And when you've got type 2 diabetes, you get the real joy of watching them start to lop off your toes and then your legs, and they start amputating body parts. And you start losing your eyesight. And your quality of life drops. See, metabolic syndrome isn't just an arbitrary set of markers. It is the marker of your overall health. If you're metabolically healthy, your body can withstand a whole lot. It's important. So start Googling metabolic health. I mean, they're not taking that stuff off. I'm not, any of the things that I've been talking about today, you can Google and you will see from the Mayo Clinic, my gosh, high triglycerides, low HDL. Oh, those are killers. They are really bad for metabolic health. And then they will give you advice that completely ignores everything that I've been telling you about as far as eating meat and low carbs. But, it is what it is. Because, look, I'm telling you, this medical system we've got is completely dysfunctional. It is not looking after you. It is, think about the FDA. It's a revolving door between them and Big Pharma. That's the way it is, unfortunately. These are people that work in the regulatory agencies so that they can get a really good job in Big Pharma. And if they just go along to get along, they get the nice 6 to 8 figure salary. And they're more than willing to sell out their souls to make that happen, unfortunately. Same thing happens with our food industry. People move from the Food and Drug and Department of Agriculture into working for the processed food manufacturers. Your doctor does not work for you anymore. There's a really good chance they work for a major pharmaceutical company, because those guys are buying up a lot of practices. So there's a lot of hospital systems, there's a lot of private practice doctors that no longer work for themselves, but instead their practice is actually owned by a pharmaceutical company or someone who sells pharmaceuticals like CVS or something like that. They're not really looking after you. The whole system, the government, your doctor, the food system, Big Pharma, etc., everybody is working with a complete and total callous disregard for you. That's why I call it a psychopathic system. They're not worried about your health. They're worried about selling you products. So if you want to fix this system, you can't depend on them. You got to figure it out for yourself. Because frankly, in this fight for your health, you're all alone in this. But we can all be alone in this together and share this community. And if you disagree with any of the things I say, please put your comments below. I don't mind respectful conversations about this stuff. I think I can completely defend everything that I've said based on everything that I've been observing. And I'm not a doctor, which frankly is a plus because it gives me a lot of freedom. I don't have to worry about medical boards. I don't have to worry about pleasing my bosses in Big Pharma. I can just look at all the evidence and just show you what I've learned over the last 10 years of trying to get healthy. And when you start off in your 50s and you're a metabolic mess, way over 300 pounds, and you're miserable, to now being in my 60s, doing pull-ups, and probably the healthiest I've been in my entire life, it makes a big difference. And I want to just share that information with as many people as I possibly can. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. I try to put out a new message at least a couple of times a week. I will talk to you again soon.